The old stone house at the end of Ravenwood Lane was infamous for its darkness. Adam Grayson, a retired military officer, had no interest in ghost stories or superstitions. But when he inherited the ominous Blackthorn Manor from a distant relative he barely knew, curiosity got the better of him. After all, a house was just a house. Brick and mortar. How bad could it really be? Don't know why anyone would set foot here, the locksmith muttered as he handed Adam the heavy brass key. That place isn't fit for living, sir. Adam forced a laugh. I've survived war zones. I think I can handle a creaky old house. The locksmith shook his head and drove away, leaving Adam alone before the massive wrought iron gates. He pushed them open with effort, their hinges shrieking in protest. The pathway to the house was tangled with overgrowth, a garden long forgotten by time. The manor itself was a hulking shadow against the dimming sky, its windows like empty eyes watching his every move. Adam took a deep breath and stepped through the heavy oak door, which groaned loudly as it swung open. The grand foyer smelled faintly of mildew and something bitterly metallic. His boots echoed on the cold stone floor as he glanced at the cobweb-draped chandelier and the dusty furniture that seemed to be frozen in time. Just a house, he muttered to himself, running a hand through his hair. He set down his duffel bag and reached for a light switch. None of them worked. Figures. A flicker of movement at the edge of his vision stopped him mid-step. He turned sharply, scanning the room. There was nothing there but shadows. He chuckled under his breath, annoyed at his own nerves. As the evening wore on, Adam explored the house room by room, taking inventory of its decay. In the library, he found a single book lying open on a dusty table. The pages were blank except for the words scrawled across one in dark ink. Don't stay past midnight. Real subtle, Adam said, his voice loud against the silence. He tossed the book aside and continued his search. The grandfather clock in the foyer struck 11, its chimes echoing ominously. A cold draft swept through the house, extinguishing the single lantern he had lit. Adam froze, listening. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. Who's there? He called, his voice steady but low. He reached instinctively for the knife in his belt, a habit from years in combat. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, as though the house itself was holding its breath. Then, faintly, a whisper came from the darkness. You're not alone. Adam's grip tightened on the knife as the sound of a door creaking open somewhere deep within the house sent a shiver down his spine. His rational mind screamed that it was just the wind, but his gut told him otherwise. He wasn't alone in Blackthorn Manor. Adam's instincts kicked in as he crept down the darkened hallway, his knife glinting in the faint moonlight filtering through the broken windows. The creak of floorboards echoed from the far side of the house, deliberate and slow. Someone or something was moving. He reached the library, its heavy door slightly ajar. Pushing it open with the tip of his blade, he scanned the room. It was as still as before, save for the book he had discarded earlier. It now lay open on the floor, pages fluttering as though stirred by an unseen hand. The words on the page had changed. "You're trespassing." Adam swallowed hard, his military training wrestling with the sheer absurdity of what he was witnessing. He stepped back into the hallway, his every sense heightened. The air felt colder now, almost suffocating. And the faint sound of whispers seemed to seep from the very walls. "Who's there?" he barked, his voice echoing through the empty house. A door slammed behind him, the sound so loud it made him flinch. He spun around, knife raised, but found only the yawning darkness of the corridor. His heart pounded as a cold gust of air brushed against the back of his neck. Then, faintly, came the voice of a child. "You shouldn't have come here." He turned sharply, but there was no one in sight. The sound had come from a room at the end of the hall. Against his better judgment, Adam moved toward it, his boots scraping against the worn wooden floor. The door to the room was slightly open, and he could see the flicker of candlelight inside. "Show yourself," he shouted, pushing the door open with force. The room was empty, save for a single chair in the center. On it sat an antique porcelain doll, its face cracked and its glassy eyes staring straight at him. In its lap rested a note written in jagged, childish handwriting. "Leave before midnight. It feeds on fear." Adam clenched his jaw, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "I don't scare easy," he muttered, tearing the note apart. The doll's head tilted. Adam froze as the doll's glass eyes shifted to meet his. A guttural laugh erupted from the shadows, deep and mocking, reverberating through the room. The candlelight flickered violently, casting grotesque shapes on the walls. Then the laughter stopped. Silence descended like a shroud, and Adam backed out of the room, keeping his knife raised. He retreated to the foyer, where the grandfather clock struck midnight. Its chime was wrong, low and distorted, as though the clock itself was groaning in agony. The house seemed to awaken. Doors slammed shut on their own, and the walls trembled as an unholy wail echoed from somewhere deep within. Shadows spilled out from the corners, twisting and writhing like living things. Adam gritted his teeth, his military discipline keeping him focused. He would not let fear take over. But as the shadows began to crawl toward him, their shapes taking on distorted humanoid forms, he realized this was no ordinary fight. Whatever haunted Blackthorn Manor was far beyond his understanding. The shadows lunged for Adam, moving with unnatural speed. He dodged, barely avoiding their cold, grasping tendrils. His breath came in ragged bursts as he fought his way toward the staircase, desperate to find higher ground. The house groaned around him, its walls seeming to close in. As he ascended the stairs, a low growl rumbled from below, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. Something was following him. Something big. At the top of the stairs, he threw himself into a room and slammed the door behind him. His heart pounded as he braced his back against the wood, holding it shut. Whatever was out there, it wasn't human. A loud thud rattled the door, followed by a deep voice, guttural and cold. "You're in my house, soldier." Adam's blood ran cold. The voice was wrong, layered with 1,000 whispers. "What do you want?" he shouted, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. The thing outside the door laughed, a low, hollow sound that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. "Stay, and I'll show you." Suddenly, the room fell silent. The pressure on the door vanished, and Adam cautiously eased away, gripping his knife tightly. He turned to survey the room and froze. The walls were lined with grotesque paintings, each depicting a scene of torment. Faceless figures screamed in agony, their bodies twisted in unnatural shapes. In the center of the room stood a large wooden wardrobe, its doors slightly ajar. Against his better judgment, Adam approached the wardrobe. The air around it felt heavier, charged with an unnatural energy. As he reached for the handle, the door creaked open on its own. Inside was a mirror. Its surface shimmered, as though it were made of liquid silver. Adam saw his reflection, but it wasn't just him. Behind his image, a shadowy figure loomed, its hollow eyes glowing faintly. Before he could react, the figure in the mirror spoke, its voice a distorted echo of his own. "You don't belong here." The mirror rippled, and Adam stumbled back as a skeletal hand reached out from the glass. The hand grabbed his wrist with a grip like iron, pulling him closer. He fought against it, but the strength of the entity was overwhelming. "Let me go!" he yelled, slashing at the hand with his knife. The blade passed through it like smoke. But the grip didn't waver. The entity's face emerged from the mirror, its features grotesque and shifting. As though it were a patchwork of different faces, it grinned, revealing jagged teeth. "You were warned, soldier. Now you're mine." With a final surge of strength, Adam kicked the mirror, shattering it into 1,000 shards. The entity screamed, its form dissolving into smoke as the shards scattered across the floor. The room fell silent again, but Adam knew better than to relax. The house wasn't done with him yet. The shattered mirror pieces began to glow faintly, and the grotesque paintings on the walls seemed to shift, their tortured figures turning their heads to watch him. A voice, softer but no less chilling, whispered from the shadows, "He won't let you leave." Adam turned to see a young girl standing in the corner of the room. She was pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "I'm the last one who tried to leave," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He's the keeper. He feeds on us." Before Adam could respond, the door burst open, and the shadows flooded in. The shadows surged into the room like a black tide, their forms writhing and twisting as they moved. Adam grabbed the girl by the wrist and pulled her behind him. "Stay close," he ordered, his voice commanding yet calm, even as fear clawed at his chest. The room itself seemed to rebel against them. The paintings on the walls contorted, their anguished figures reaching out with grotesque hands. The floorboards beneath them groaned and cracked, as if something beneath was trying to break free. "Run!" Adam shouted, yanking the girl toward the door. They barreled into the hallway, where the shadows were waiting, their shapes tall and jagged, their glowing eyes watching hungrily. "They're everywhere!" the girl cried, her small hand gripping his tightly. "Trust me," Adam said, forcing confidence into his voice. "We'll make it out." The shadows closed in, their whispering voices growing louder, filling the air with a cacophony of fear and despair. Adam's military instincts kicked in. He scanned the hall for an opening, spotting a narrow staircase leading downward. "This way," he said, pulling the girl with him. They descended into the darkness, the stairs groaning under their weight. The deeper they went, the colder the air became, and the whispers turned into guttural growls. At the bottom of the stairs, they found themselves in a stone basement, lit by a single flickering lantern. The room was filled with strange, ancient symbols carved into the walls. In the center stood an altar, and on it rested an old, leather-bound book. "What is this place?" the girl whispered, her voice trembling. "The heart of this house," Adam replied, his gaze fixed on the book. He approached it cautiously, the shadows pressing closer around them. The air felt heavy, as though the house itself was trying to stop him. The book opened on its own, its pages flipping wildly, before stopping on a page covered in dense, dark script. Adam recognized some of the symbols. They were similar to marks he'd seen etched on the walls in war-torn regions, places haunted by legends of ancient curses. The girl gasped. "That's his book, the Keeper's book." Adam glanced at her. "If this is his, then it's our way out." The shadows shrieked, their forms growing more erratic, as if they understood what Adam intended. He grabbed the book and began reading aloud, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. The symbols on the walls began to glow, and the shadows recoiled, their shapes flickering like dying flames. A deafening roar shook the basement as the Keeper's voice filled the air. "You cannot destroy me." Adam ignored the voice and continued reading. The symbols grew brighter, their light burning through the darkness. The shadows howled, their forms disintegrating as the light consumed them. The girl clung to Adam as the room began to collapse, the walls cracking and the floor shaking violently. "What's happening?" she screamed. "Hold on," Adam shouted, clutching the book tightly. With a final booming roar, the Keeper's voice was silenced, and the shadows were gone. The light from the symbols faded, leaving them in complete darkness. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, faintly, the sound of birds chirping broke through the stillness. Adam opened his eyes to find himself outside the manor, standing at the edge of the overgrown pathway. The girl was beside him, her face pale but relieved. Behind them, Blackthorn Manor stood in ruins, its once imposing structure reduced to rubble. "Is it over?" the girl asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Adam looked at the crumbled house, then at the book in his hands. For now, he said, though a lingering unease gnawed at him. As they walked away, leaving the cursed grounds behind, neither noticed the faint shadow that slipped through the rubble, its hollow eyes watching them go.